Hi again. Walter Rauschenbusch, page 153, Christianity and the Social Crisis. Rauschenbusch is meditating on why it was that the early church was not more aggressive about social conditions and changing them. And he's talking about Paul here. This section is entitled Postponement to the Lord's Coming. Paul was not an anti-slavery man. He doubtless realized the oppressive conditions of many slaves, just as we recognize the hard lot of miners or oyster dredgers. But to his lofty idealism, outward conditions were almost indifferent. He himself bore poverty and homelessness, almost with equanimity for Christ's sake. Let the slave realize that he is Christ's free man, and he can hold his head and as erect as any. This is Paul's advice in 1 Corinthians 7:17-24. This is sublime, but it is too rare an atmosphere for the mass of men, and even the few that can maintain such victorious elevation of soul only under the tension of unusual feelings and only for a limited time. Paul and the entire primitive church were under such tension. They expected the very speedy coming of the Lord. Paul expected that this event would signalize the transformation and spiritualization of all the material world. And what did our transient earthly troubles matter in the face of so tremendous a change? Others, as we have seen, expected the coming of the Lord to usher in an earthly millennium of justice and happiness, which would solve all social questions in one blessed catastrophe. They were then in the same position as those revolutionary socialists who refused to dabble with social palliatives because the people are almost on the point of seizing control of all. We know now that the Christians of the first century were at the beginning of Christian history. They thought they were at the end. This expectation, to anyone who took it seriously, affected all relations and outlooks on life. Paul even advised against marriage on account of the nearness of the end and the upheaval sure to precede it. He counseled an attitude of inner detachment. Let those who had wives be as they had none, and those who purchased property as if they did not own it. Let those who had dealings with the world make them as slight as possible. For the time was short, and the present make-up of the world was soon to pass away. Given that conviction of the coming end, and this was the language of an heroic soul, anyone with that faith would be morally absolved from entering on any moral crusade that would take time. But without that honest faith, the same attitude would be a shirking of responsibility. If a man spends only a single night in a shack in the woods, he does not mind if the stars shine through the roof or the rain leaks in, for in the morning he will strike camp. But if he occupies a house for years in which roof and drainage are defective, and if his children are perpetually sick in consequence, it is criminal for him to let things run on, because someday it may happen that he will move. And this expectation, of course, is linked to the apocalyptic worldview that at least the early churches inherited from their Jewish background. Put a link into Leon Morris on the nature of apocalyptic and its influence. Next time, hostility to the empire and its civilization.